Hey, everybody, welcome to the 12 Days of Innovation. We are so excited to have Matt Miller here. Jennifer and I have had the opportunity to connect with Matt multiple times through the 12 days, and so happy to have him here. He's representing his Christmas sweater, which is excellent. Got the Kahoot sweater on. I'm jealous, but I'm happy with what I've got on here. So. Matt, thank you for being here and just being a part of it again in what an incredible 2020 has become. So it's a light point to have you be a part of this with us.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
That's so let's dive in. I have dabbled in your newest book, Tech Like a Pirate, and I had to ask the question. You start your book and you create this experience, and you write, urinals and toilet stalls, they have something to teach us about teaching. You got to take me through your thought process on that, and how that you kick your book off with that statement and what that means.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. We can totally go there. So, when I wrote my first book, Ditch That Textbook, I had somebody come up to me after that and say, I judge a book not by its cover, but by the first line of the book. And in Ditch That Textbook, it was something to the effect of, I had never seen students run for the door so fast. So after I had that comment, that kind of changed the way that I looked at writing books. So I thought, okay, if I'm going to at least win this guy over again, I've got to come up with something good at the beginning. And so, yeah, urinals and toilet stalls, they have something to teach us about teaching. So here's the idea behind this one, is that, attention is hard to come by these days. Really sort of all over the place in our entire lives. And a lot of companies are trying to, grab that attention wherever they can get it. And it's even harder, of course, because we've got our mobile devices and it's easy for us to just pull those out and avoid any sort of distraction based advertising or marketing that we've had in the past. And so as they looked at the day-to-day lives of people, they started to think, okay, where are those down times where people don't have anything to look at that we could put something in front of their face? And so that's where the urinals and toilet stalls thing came into place, is that you're starting to see, and more and more, especially in like restaurants, you have those little mini billboards almost right there in the bathroom while you're doing your business, trying to catch your attention for just that brief moment. And I think I even joke in the book, like, unless you're looking at your cell phone while you're doing your bit, but you're not that person, right? Like, and I think there's something to be said about that, because attention is really hard to come by these days. And so we see it in the classroom. We see it with, students whenever we teach, sometimes even despite our best efforts, we get the glazed over eyes, we get the lack of attention and all of that. And so, anything that we can do, I think, to grab our students' attention, to get them motivated, to get them engaged is worth doing. Because really, if students kind of flip that attention switch to off, they might as well be somewhere else. And if they might as well be somewhere else, they're definitely not learning. And so anything that we can do to flip that attention switch on, I think is time well spent. And that's kind of where the urinals and toilet stalls thing came from.
That's great. I love it. Okay, so obviously this year things have changed in the classroom. So teachers more than ever are experiencing more doubt and roadblocks in their teaching. So what advice do you have for those teachers?
Yeah, that's a good question. I actually devoted an entire chapter of my book, Tech Like a Pirate, to this. And I've noticed from doing workshops with teachers that, yeah, I can give them ideas, I can give them tools, I can give them strategies. But sometimes the thing that's standing in the way of them making change in their classrooms isn't a lack of ideas and isn't a lack of strategies, but a lack of confidence. Sometimes there are those insecurities that get in the way of us doing what I think deep down inside we realize that we probably really could do. And sometimes those insecurities and doubts and roadblocks just kind of stand in the way of who we want to be and what we want to do. And so, I addressed a handful of these in my book, Tech Like a Pirate. And I think one of them is just a general doubt and general lack of confidence going forward. I think sometimes we go, we'll say, this whole like creative teaching thing, this whole like, trying to come up with my own lessons and stuff, like I'm not that kind of person. And I don't, you just have those general doubts that you can do it and that you can try some of this stuff. And, for anybody who's like that, I think that you suffer from a similar condition that I do. It's this thing that a lot of people call imposter syndrome. This term seems to be getting more and more out in the general vocabulary of people. And it's that idea that, it's that idea where you start to think, who am I to do this? Who am I to, what are my qualifications to do this? Nobody's given me permission to do this. Like why me? How do I think that I'm able to do that? I've dealt with that an awful lot in my own classroom. Trying some idea or trying something new. And then like right before it's supposed to go, I'm like, is this a bad idea? Like, am I qualified to do this? And I think what I needed to learn is that you don't need a permission slip from somebody to try something new. You don't need that permission. You need to go in and confidently say, hey, I'm going to do the best that I can do. And I'm going to see how it goes. And then I'm going to take the results of what I've done. And I can always try to be better next time. So, I think that's definitely one of when it comes to doubt and roadblocks and everything, I think that's one. And let me give you another one. This is another one I talk about in my book. Another one is overwhelm. Did we talk about overwhelm the last time I was on? No? Okay, good. Because I'm going to give you my spiel on overwhelm real quick. It's short, don't worry. Because I think sometimes it's super easy, especially in this day and age, to get bogged down in all of the possibilities and all the options. You get within a specific app or tool and there's a ton of features. And then in addition to just that one having lots of features, now there's also all of these other apps that you can use all the time. And there are different strategies for using them and different learning platforms. And I mean, when you start to multiply all of the possibilities, they just seem endless. And the worst part about it is that there'll be more tomorrow than there are today. Like it's never getting less, And so it's so easy for us to go, man, I'm just so overwhelmed and it's just crippling. My overwhelm is crippling. And I felt that way too. And I still do. It's like, just because I talk about it in the 12 days, it doesn't mean that I've got it licked, And so there's this definition of overwhelm that has been really helpful to me that I'll share here. This didn't come from me, but I can't remember the source. So the idea is that overwhelm isn't the problem of having too many options, even though many times we think that it is. It's not the problem of having too many options. It's just not knowing where to start. Once you can put your finger on where you want to start, that's empowering. And then all of a sudden, it's just a path forward. But sometimes knowing where to start is tricky too. And so then you're like, okay, Matt, so you say that, overwhelm isn't the problem of having too many options. It's not knowing where to start. Well, I still don't know where to start. And so if you don't know where to start, don't feel bad. You're not the first. You definitely won't be the last. Here are a couple of places where you might consider starting. Number one, start small. Start someplace where that choice is something doable. It makes you go, that I can do. You get that one done. You have kind of like confidence and momentum to go on to the next thing. You could also start with impact. Number 2, start with impact. If there's an area where your students are struggling or where you're struggling as a teacher, an area where if there was some improvement, it would show up big time. Maybe start there. And, sometimes what's the worst that could happen? It's like not any worse than what's already happening, And then the third one is start with passion. Never hurts to start with passion, something you're excited about, something your students are excited about. That excitement can drive you forward. So with any one of those, I think that the big thing is just start. So if overwhelm is your doubt and your roadblock, that's one. I could go on and on with more doubt and more roadblocks and everything, but maybe that's a good place to stop.
Now that's great. Those are great words of advice and so true. I know, especially the overwhelm one for me. I always had difficulty knowing where to start. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
In your times that you've spent with educators during this pandemic time, have you seen anything that could be a great support for our youngest learners? I mean, we have some pre-K and kinder and first grade students who are learning at home, and I can't even imagine trying to connect with a 4-year-old on a screen. But anyway, do you have you seen anything that's worked, or have any words of advice for those teachers?
Yeah, I think that's such an important question. And I just have to say that through all of the remote learning and the hybrid learning and everything, the teachers that are engaging the littles on screens from home, they are my heroes. Those are the ones, whenever you've got littles and they've got to sit down at a screen and you want to try to teach them something, and there are all sorts of distractions, and they don't, inherently do the tech as easily sometimes because they're still young. And oh my goodness, I can't even imagine what that's like. So as I try to answer your question, for anybody that's watching this, just know that, first of all, you have my utmost respect. You are my hero. I'm not going to try to pretend that I know even what it's like to be you, or try to give you solutions on my own. I'm not going to try to brainstorm solutions on my own, but I have talked to a handful of primary teachers, and they've shared some things that have worked for them. So a lot of this is coming from, there are these 3 primary teachers from California. So Ben and Eric and Michael, and I'm going to share a link at some point. If you do a Google search for Ditch That Textbook, I think it's like K2 distance learning or something like that. I did this great interview with these 3 guys who are primary teachers. 3 guys who are primary teachers. Like, I got 3 of them, 3 males who teach primary all in one video call. Like, that's pretty rare. And some of the things that they talked about were brilliant. Like, for one, Ben Cogswell, he's a kindergarten teacher, and he says that he wants to help his students with their microphone fluency. And so they spend explicit time working on some of those details of, like, how do you turn your microphone on? How do you turn your microphone off? Sometimes he will even use the microphones like a survey or a poll. So he'll say, if you like spaghetti, turn your microphone on. If you like pizza, turn your microphone off. And he'll have pictures of both of them. And he's got a little picture of what the icon looks like when the microphone is on. On Google Meet, it's those 3 little lines, and the one in the middle is bigger. He's got a little picture of that on a piece of paper on a stick. And then if you flip the stick, that piece of paper has the mute logo on it. And so now he's not just telling the kids, you got to mute, you got to unmute. He's showing them the picture. So now they don't even have to process the word. They just see the pictures. And the more that they play with it, the better. Another thing that they talked about when it came to the mute part, they said, when we do learning online with our kids, we don't want them to be on mute all the time. That's not what we love about teaching. We want to hear these kids' voices. And sure, it's going to be kind of chaotic and it's going to be messy sometimes, but they're saying we would rather err on the side of a little messy and a little chaotic so we can hear those kids' voices so that they feel a part of class and they feel heard and they feel understood, and that's so important to them that they're willing to do that. The other thing that they told me that I thought was brilliant is that the parents are almost like co-teachers. And when I say almost like co-teachers, I don't even really mean almost like. They are co-teachers with the primary teachers. And so, anything you can do to support the parents in being able to help the kids. But the other thing that came out of that conversation too is that, remote learning doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be a negative thing, because there are some inherently cool things about teaching kids when they're at home. For instance, you have an entire house or an entire apartment or wherever they live, an entire house worth of props and accessories that you can go grab at any moment. It's easy to be able to share a little bit of who you are and what your world is like. Now, granted, you have to be cognizant of, helping kids to have a level of privacy so that they don't feel like they have to open up their whole house and their families and everything if they don't want to. But, there are some really inherently cool things about it that we miss out on, even when we're teaching face to face. So I'm just passing those along from primary teachers that have told me about that in, teaching in pandemic times. Those are some of the things that have really helped them.
Those are great ideas, and I feel like those, even in a secondary scenario, those could work. Even a high school student to have the sign that pops up that says, "Hey, you need to unmute," that sort of thing. I could have used that in supporting teachers, because I think my number one phrase for helping teachers when the pandemic hit was, "You're on mute."
Yep.
And so, it's just getting creative with it. I saw a tweet of a primary school teacher. I don't exactly know what grade, but she was putting stickers on her head every time a different student would, on her face, every time a student would respond in the Zoom room. She wanted them to get more engaged. And so she had stickers, and obviously the kids get just sucked in. Okay, we got to cover her face. So cool.
And
well, Matt,
Taylor, can I add one more? You brought up such a good point. You said with some of that, it would work in the secondary level. And I think, when they said that they want to make sure that their students aren't on mute all the time, I think that's so easy for us secondary teachers. My career was in the high school Spanish classroom, and I think it's so easy for us secondary teachers to get in that rut of, I have a lot of stuff to cover. I have a lot of things to do. We have to plow through all of this content, and it's easy to mute those kids' voices. And, any way that we can build kids' voices in and give them an opportunity to talk, even about the little things, that's good for them academically, but it also fills a little bit of a social void too. It can be so isolating sitting on the other side of a Zoom call all the time when you're not there face to face with other people. So I'm so glad you brought that up.
Well, and you get lost too when you pull up a Google slideshow, because now you're not even seeing everybody. You see maybe 3 or 4. And it like you said, more and more isolating. So those are some great ideas that you've brought. And we have some questions. We reached out to some people who are super excited about you specifically coming back and being a part of the 12 days. And so we've got teachers from both elementary and secondary level that sent us some questions to ask you. So the first one is from Adrian Baylor. And she asks, what are some ways to get face-to-face and remote learners interacting with each other? And for those who don't know, a majority of our teachers here in Birdville are teaching both online and face-to-face at the same time, that concurrent model. So any ideas, thoughts on that?
Yeah. First of all, I want to say, and I'm going to echo what Catlin Tucker either has said that you've already heard or that she's going to say earlier. Taylor was telling me a little bit about this conversation, and I just have to totally agree with this. If you're teaching concurrently where you have kids face-to-face and you have kids remotely, I know I said the teachers of the littles were my heroes. you all are my heroes too. Like that is legit work. Trying to engage, trying to make sure that over here, the technology is all working and your microphone's working and that somebody's not talking or not having noise going on in the background because they didn't mute their mic, but then also watching kids over here and trying to engage with both of them, making everybody feel it's like spinning plates and trying not to let any of the plates fall, So you all are my heroes. And I also want to say, if you're doing concurrent work and you're like, oh my goodness, this is so much work. This is probably, even though it may not be the situation you want to be in, when you engage students well in that environment, it really lifts them up, even though it's hard. Like, when you're able to provide for kids face to face, I just don't want to underscore, I want to highlight as much as possible how important it is that if you're in that situation, how much you're doing for those students. Okay. With all of that out of the way, how do we get those face-to-face and those remote learners engaged? And Adrian mentioned Google Docs and Google Slides. And I think that's probably one of my favorite ways to do it. See, there's this idea that if you take a Google Slides presentation and you create a slide for every student, if you create that slide and then you go up to the share button and you change it to anyone with the link, this is in that bottom section in the sharing window that pops up, the bottom section, you change it to anyone with the link can edit. And so now you've created a slide presentation where everybody can edit. And so what you do is you have your students get on and they can work inside their own slide. But then what's neat about it too is once they're done with their work, they can jump off and they can leave comments on each other's stuff. Now, this is great for what the thing I love about it is that, we're all kind of working in the same digital space, whether we're face-to-face, whether we're remote. And what's neat about it is that whenever kids are done, then they can go off to each other's slides and they can leave each other comments. And of course, if you have, good protocols and a good plan in place for how you want them to interact with each other, that can be super powerful. And so, being able to do some of that and to be able to do it, pretty much simultaneously, concurrently, if you will, so that everybody is interacting at the same time. That's pretty cool. I think that's great. I've heard of some teachers that have created a bunch of Google Meet rooms or Zoom rooms and done breakout. If you have Zoom and you've tinkered with breakout rooms, you probably know as much about that as me, if not more. So I think that's really good too. And then of course you've got some of the asynchronous stuff, the stuff that isn't live face-to-face at the same time, like Flipgrid, for instance. I know you all are probably very familiar with Flipgrid. That's one, excuse me. That's one where even though it's not live and synchronous, the ability to leave videos for each other can be really good. And I'll give you another tool that's right along with that too. There's an audio version or an audio tool that's similar to Flipgrid called Synth. And Synth lets you record audio and connect with audio. And sometimes, students are kind of unsure about recording their faces. And so maybe this is the tool that helps them kind of break over that barrier. So, it's at gosynth.com. It's a free tool. It's almost like interactive podcasting. That's the way that they kind of brand it. And so being able to interact with each other through audio, it means that you don't have to sit down and devote your entire focus to it. You can just kind of almost listen as you go. So I think those are some of the ways. And really, if you're willing to, I think the fact that Adrian brings this topic up and was willing to get into this, I think the fact that you're willing to think about it and willing to at least dabble in this, I think you're going to see great gains for that.
Yeah, those are some really good ideas. We have another teacher fan named Cindy Sawai that has submitted a question. What advice can you give us to know if a resource is worth our time to invest in?
Oh, Cindy, this is a fantastic question. I'm so glad you asked this because this kind of plays back to what we were talking about earlier with overwhelm, right? That, you know, it's so easy to get bogged down in all of the tools and all. And you said if a resource is worth our time, resource could be a number of different things. And, I think one lesson that I learned in my own classroom real early on is that I learned that, obviously you don't have to use everything. It's actually not a great idea to use everything. One of the things that I found is that if you can come up with, one or two or maybe three good digital tools that really allow you to do a lot of things, then students don't have to relearn the user interface, don't have to relearn the buttons. They don't have to learn how a whole new thing works. And so you end up saving yourself some time. So the ability to focus in on just a few things is really good. Now, your question was, how do we know if something is worth it? I think there's a handful of things that I would look at. One is I'm always curious to see what other educators are doing with it. That's not to say that I might find something, and because I might find something that is a perfect fit for what I want to do, and nobody else has found it yet, or nobody else uses it quite the way that I want to. And so, but it's probably a safe bet that if other teachers are loving it and getting a lot of use out of it, there's probably a better chance. So that's one thing that I always do. And I always like to look to Twitter and social media. I like to ask other people in, buildings that I visit. When I was in the classroom, just up and down the hallway, what people are using. So there's that, I think. I think the other thing is, if you can foresee a way that resource improves things significantly for you and your students, if you can envision a way that it can do that, then maybe it's worth checking out. I'll give you an example out of my classroom of a time when this didn't happen. I wanted to make everything paperless real early on in my career. I wanted to use technology as much as I could. And sometimes I just wanted to do a real quick survey, like a quick poll. And so I tried to set up Google Forms for that. I had a couple of the early on polling tools, and it took some setup and everything. And at some point I thought, why don't I just ask them to raise their hand? Raise your hand if you think this, raise your hand if you think this. Okay, we got more of this. Let's move on. That took 5 seconds, and it took 0 setup. And so my problem was that I didn't foresee how that could make things better. So, I think that we've got to be judicious in the tools that we use in our classroom, and we've got to protect. I almost felt like I had to protect my students from the junk that was going to waste our time, because class time is so precious. Those instructional minutes, those are the key. And whenever things rob us of instructional minutes, then they're really robbing our students and us of opportunities. So those are a couple of the key things, I think. And also, I'll throw one more in real quick. The student's ability to use it in an efficient way. So if it's something that is going to take significantly more time than if you used a piece of paper, or significantly more time than if you used another tool, I would sort of steer clear from that, I think. Yeah, that one's kind of obvious, but I thought I'd throw that in there too. So those are some thoughts anyway.
Great. Thank you for those words of advice. We have another question. This is from Keith Davis, and he says, I love your use of the quote, "Don't just teach a lesson, create an experience." What is the best takeaway you have seen from this approach?
Don't just teach a lesson, create an experience. Okay, so that's a favorite of mine. And that quote comes from Dave Burgess's fantastic book, Teach Like a Pirate. I first read that one all the way back in 2013. I got my own copy of Teach Like a Pirate. I actually asked for it on my birthday. Like I got it as a birthday gift, a teacher book as a birthday gift. Shows you the kind of teacher nerd that I am. And that was the one line that just echoed in my ears for a long time. Don't just teach a lesson, create an experience. It's this idea that lessons are forgettable. Lessons are something that kids get all the time. Lessons don't take I'm reusing his word, but they don't take the experience into account. They don't take into account, like, what was it like? How did the student feel about it? How did the student, see it, smell it, taste it, touch it? What emotions did it evoke? Like all of that stuff. And I think that stuff's so important. In fact, in my book, Tech Like a Pirate, which is follow-up to Teach Like a Pirate, which is based along this entire quote we just mentioned, don't just teach a lesson, create an experience. My whole book is like an entire book dedicated to that one line. In that book, I share some research that backs that up. For instance, there is a neuroscience study that says that emotional events have a privileged status in memory. So if you tie emotions to something and you want students to remember it, if you want students to remember something, tie emotions to it, happiness, joy, excitement, sadness, injustice, anger, any of that stuff, like brings a memory to the top of your stack of memories, so to speak. And so, there's actually neuroscience that backs all of this up. So anyway, to get back to Keith's question, what's the best takeaway you've seen from this approach? There have been so many. There are so many different ways to create an experience. To pick out a best would be really hard. I'll say that sometimes I think some of my best ideas have come from inspiration that I see all around the students. So for instance, I'll keep an eye on YouTube sometimes and be like, if we're doing video responses through Flipgrid or something, I'll go, okay, what are the cool YouTube things that are going on that we can use to frame an activity through? Like for instance, one type of video, I can't remember if I talked about this, and I've done this so many times now with you guys, I can't remember what I have and haven't said, so I'm just going to go with it anyway. But the one type of video that I've seen on YouTube that I think crosses over nicely to a classroom activity is the unboxing video. You guys ever seen an unboxing video before? You know what I'm talking about? This is where a YouTuber gets a new cell phone or a subscription box or something. And it's a video of them opening that box, and they're taking the things out, they're showing you the packaging, and they're commenting about everything that they're taking out of there. Have students create a box related to what they've learned, turn on the camera, and then create one of those, So like, as they're looking at the box, they identify who's sending them the box and who's receiving the box. So it could be just them, the students, or they could be acting as somebody else who's receiving the box. They look at the packaging on the outside, they open it up, maybe there's a note inside of it. That note could be from the sender. Of course, the student's written this note, and they read it to give the viewer more context and to demonstrate their learning. They start pulling things out of the box, and then they comment on it, and they can show their reaction to that thing and talk about why they thought it was a good idea. Once they're done, they could talk about what wasn't in the box that they expected. All of that stuff allows them to demonstrate what they've learned. If they're trying to find ways to take what they've learned and show that through that video, there are lots of opportunities. And that's just through a lens on an assignment that they're very familiar with. They're familiar with that unboxing video lens because they've all probably watched one at some point. They're popular on YouTube. So just if you keep your teacher antenna up and you're always watching for those kinds of things that could turn into fun activities. See, that unboxing video activity really is just having the student recall and talk about the content that they've learned. We haven't changed the assignment really. We're just changing the way that the student experiences it, the way that the student expresses it. It's almost like putting on a costume or taking a role in theater or something, you know, like we're just doing it through a different lens. And sometimes when you're willing to have a little bit of creativity and come up with a little different lens on that activity, it changes the student's whole experience of it. So I think that's one way that you can go after that. So I'm glad Keith asked that question. That's a fun one to answer.
Well, and that's a great a strategy to take away from this. Thank you for sharing that with us for the first time. I don't think we've heard that one before. Good. So you're good. We're all squared away in that. Well, so we are curious. What is next? What are you working on right now, Matt? That is going to be coming to us in the future. We had some other people on our team that when we asked, you know, what do we want to ask Matt Miller? They were just curious about, is there another book? What's happening when it comes to you? What are you working on?
Yeah, I've got a couple of things I'm pretty excited about. One of them is the Ditch Summit. So my Ditch That Textbook Digital Summit, this will be the 5th year for it now. Free online conference that I do for teachers. And in the Ditch Summit, I interview a wide variety of different educators. And in those interviews, I'm trying to pull practical ideas out that you can apply in your classroom right away. So it's not just like listening to two people yammer on, but like I am relentlessly searching for little nuggets and little ideas that you can bring back into your classroom. And, throughout these 5 years, when you include this year's new videos, there will be more than 60 of these video presentations you can go watch. Each one can come with its own 1-hour certificate of completion for professional development credit. And so it's going to be available this year from December 14th. I'm looking up at my board now to make sure I get the dates right. December 14th through January 8th, the whole 4 weeks that it's going to be open, to give you plenty of opportunity to watch whatever of those videos that you want. So anybody that wants to go check that out, they can go to ditchsummit.com to get registered for that. And we'll email you when we have details. I also want to, actually, I've got 2 more quick things. Can I share 2 things? Is that okay? Actually, that's a total of 3, but I still have my email newsletter that comes out once a week. And if you're watching this and you don't get my email newsletter, you might consider signing up for it. It's got all sorts of practical, creative, fun ideas that you can plug in your classroom right away. Like, for instance, the unboxing video. That was a big part of one of my emails, within the last several months. And so if you want to get those ideas in your inbox every week, you can just go to ditchthattextbook.com/101. And when you go there, you can download, I've got these 3 free ebooks packed full of more ideas you can use in your classroom. And then you get those emails on a regular basis with the new stuff that we're cooking up. So that's number 2. And then the final one, I haven't announced this like super, super far and wide yet. So you may have heard this first here on the 12 days. But I am writing a new book, and it's all about Google Classroom. And I can't remember, I should have asked this before we came online. Do you guys use Google Classroom?
We don't anymore. We're in Canvas, but we're happy to hear about the book for sure.
Okay. Well, in that case here, let me do a little adaptation for you then. The book is called Do More with Google Classroom. And the idea behind it is that, there's so many, tutorials and step-by-step guides on how to use the features of Google Classroom, but there's not a whole lot that tells you how to teach well with it. What does good teaching look like in the confines of Google Classroom? That's the thing that I found is missing a lot. And so I basically walk, chapter by chapter through different parts of that platform, and show, what does it look like whenever the features of Google Classroom are meshed together with good sound pedagogy and good teaching and learning. The good news is that a lot of the features that are included in Google Classroom are also included in Canvas. So if you don't have to have the explicit step-by-step, click this button, then click this button, and you want to know what good teaching looks like in a learning management system, this book still may be a good fit. And Little secret here, at the top of my mind right now is creating another version of these books for some other learning management systems, including Canvas, one of these days. Don't know when that'll happen, but anyway, that's all the stuff that I have coming up as right now. At least that's all I can think of.
Awesome. Well, we are looking forward to that, and definitely, I know I get the newsletter. I've been a part of the Ditch Summit. The Ditch Summit is what inspired the 12 days, and so we are thankful for that, and thankful for you, Matt, for being a part of this again. And just thank you so much. It's been great as always. I appreciate your sweater and your style, and what you bring to us every time that you've come and been a part of this. So thank you for that.
Hey, thank you so much. I appreciate you guys. I always have a good time coming on with you. And I also have to say that your Christmas tree is totally on point back there. I see a couple of really good titles on that, hanging on that Christmas tree right there. So yeah, that has my full support.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, sir. We appreciate it. Always good.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. It was wonderful. Great ideas and some great words of advice.